Chelsea are ruthless. The man that felt this more ruthlessly than most was Carlo Ancelotti. He managed Chelsea to what was at that point their best campaign of all time in his first season. And yet, it wasn't enough. With one conversation in a hallway of an opposing stadium, he was gone. They cleared his desk for him. All the same, there was clearly a method to the madness because this was a sacrifice that led to greatness. Still, there is a question mark on this period and what could have been. It's well worth looking a little deeper. Sometimes football clubs don't just lose managers, they lose a little more. Depending on the coach, some might call it identity. Chelsea's identity in the mid-2000s was, simply put, win by any means. Oftentimes, the means were not entirely attractive. Nonetheless, identity is a very nuanced thing, as we'll learn over the course of this episode. And by 2009, Chelsea had misplaced their identity somewhere between Jose Mourinho and a revolving door of increasingly desperate appointments. Mourinho's 2007 departure had created a vacuum that nobody could fill. Avram Grant came close, reaching a Champions League final only to be sacked. World Cup winner Luis Felipe Scolari arrived and left 7 months later, having completely lost the dressing room and pretty much going to war with everyone. Gus Hiddink steadied things for a bit and lifted the FA Cup, but he was always just a stopgap. 5 head coaches in 2 years, not 5 across a decade of mediocrity, but 5 in the immediate aftermath of being England's dominant force. That's not normal instability, that's pure chaos. Roman Abramovich, Chelsea's enigmatic Russian billionaire owner, had a problem, and the frustration cut deeper than just results. I mentioned identity earlier on, and that was for a reason. It's the very reason that Mourinho was sacked. The identity I spoke of earlier was what the world saw Chelsea as: pragmatic, intense, boss. Abramovich reportedly frequently expressed frustration that the team lacked flair despite its success. He had a fondness for signing big-name players, Andrei Shevchenko, for example, a high-flying, Ballon d'Or winning, Champions League winning striker from Milan. Also, a player that Mourinho did not want. He wanted Samuel Eto'o. Signings like this were an indication of the glamour Abramovich wanted his club to exude, and when Mourinho stopped his serial winning streak, Abramovich could no longer justify the compromise in his own head. And don't take my word for it. According to the man that would eventually take the mantle, the Chelsea owner said the following to him in secret just before his appointment. Quote, "I want to find a manager that gives my team an identity. When I see Barcelona or Manchester United, I find an identity in the team, but when I watch Chelsea, I cannot." End quote. And hanging over everything was the Champions League fixation. 6 years into his Chelsea ownership, European glory remained elusive, and it had become an obsession that would eventually consume everything. And on that front, at the end of a long list of woes, there was the belief that Abramovich's window of opportunity was closing rapidly. Chelsea had world-class talents: John Terry, Frank Lampard, Didier Drogba, Petr Cech, but these were veterans, long past the age of peak performers. Did they really have more to give? Here we had an owner demanding perfection while simultaneously creating conditions that made it kind of impossible. Was there anyone capable of giving him what he wanted? By 2009, Carlo Ancelotti possessed the kind of resume that made owners drool. 4 Champions League titles, 2 as a player, 2 as a manager. He wasn't just experienced, he was European royalty. Abramovich was in love. Thanks to Ancelotti revealing these details voluntarily in his 2010 autobiography, Carlo Ancelotti, The Beautiful Game of an Ordinary Genius, we got some insight into how this appointment went down. It's where we got the quote about Abramovich desperately seeking an identity for his beloved Chelsea. A quote that, as Ancelotti put it, came on a night where he was cosplaying as James Bond. Let me explain. Or rather, let him explain. The manager of Milan is on a secret mission. I, like 007 on my own, sat behind a driver with the face of a killer. More than a taxi, this was like a time machine. From Milanello to Stamford Bridge. From yesterday to today. From one devil to another. During those meetings, of which there were apparently a few, it seems Abramovich impressed Ancelotti as much as the other way around. Quote, "While he was talking, my curiosity perked up. He wasn't the monster the papers painted him to be. The first thing I noticed was his timidity. The second, his great knowledge of football." End quote. Abramovich, for his part, was impressed by more than just Ancelotti's tactical knowledge. What he saw in the Italian was someone who thrived under Silvio Berlusconi at Milan, another controversial billionaire. Carletto was clearly someone who wouldn't be intimidated by big personalities or boardroom pressure. Ancelotti's Milan had been famous for elegant football, the fluidity of Kaká and Pirlo, the attacking verve that made them entertaining champions. Maldini, Nesta, Seedorf, so many more, and of course, Andrei Shevchenko himself. If we're talking brands and identity, tactical flexibility and emotional intelligence are as on-brand for Ancelotti as anything could be. Didier Drogba, a man Ancelotti would soon be linking up with, captured it perfectly when he spoke about Ancelotti's demeanor. Quote, "I love the way he manages the team, the calmness he conveys to us. We work a lot under him, but with a smile on our faces." End quote. At the end of the day, Ancelotti offered two things: the ability to simultaneously deliver trophies and create that elusive identity. The stage was set for something special. The question was whether Abramovich's patience would allow it to fully develop. There are probably those that could say that they expected what was to come for Ancelotti's first season, but I don't know if anyone would believe if they expected what actually happened. Ancelotti's first year was nothing other than insane. He immediately adapted to the league as well as the players on hand. Most managers fall in love with one system and stick with it stubbornly, even when circumstances change. Ancelotti was different, constantly adapting to the moment, putting the onus on the players.
He wanted to pick our brains of, is this too much tactic for the players to do? Are we doing too much of this? And that I've never had a manager actually, in probably all my career, that had asked the players and give them a bit of responsibility.
He's always spoken about how certain players like Zinedine Zidane, Cristiano Ronaldo, Kaká, and more have made him not hesitate to change his system to suit what he had at his disposal. The same can obviously be said about any mixture of talent that he has, and there was no difference here. He started at Chelsea with a midfield diamond formation, maximizing Frank Lampard as a roaming attacking midfielder behind two strikers. It worked beautifully through autumn. Frank Lampard thrived, Nicolas Anelka and Didier Drogba terrorized defenses, and wins piled up. And then Drogba left for the African Cup of Nations in January. Lesser managers would have panicked or tried to force the same system with inferior personnel. Ancelotti simply switched to his Milan-era Christmas tree formation, a 4-3-2-1 that made Anelka a lone striker with creative support behind him. And guess what happened? Chelsea kept winning. Later, as the race intensified, he shifted again to a 4-3-3, adding width and even more attacking threat. The fluidity was remarkable. Same players, different configurations, consistent dominance. 103 goals in the Premier League, a record that stood for years. It's the kind of attacking dominance that inspires retrospectives like the one you're watching or listening to right now. But those numbers only scratch the surface of what made that season extraordinary. Their main opponents were Manchester United in the league, a United side that had just lost Cristiano Ronaldo to Real Madrid in a deal that now seems like a steal. Ironically, Ancelotti would soon take full advantage of that steal. Manchester United, though, did not let up as many thought they would. Wayne Rooney took it upon himself to be the guiding star and shone brightly with 26 goals in the league. But ultimately, it was the Didier Drogba and Frank Lampard show that would prevail in the league-wide context. Together, these two were on another level this season, with a combined 96 goal contributions between the two in all competitions. And no, I'm not joking. And yes, they played for the same team. The context also matters quite a lot here. Both of these players were 32 years old in 2010. Drogba had only scored 5 goals in the previous league campaign, 8 in the year before that. Lampard's numbers hadn't dropped off as much, but this peak for both of them was unexpected and truly something to behold. Apart from them, the whole team was functioning at a very high level. The veterans were in total control. Petr Cech, Ashley Cole, Michael Essien, Ricardo Carvalho, Joe Cole, John Terry, Flora Maluda. None of these players were younger than 28 this season, bar Michael Essien, who was 27. 5-0 against Blackburn, 4-0 against Bolton, 4-0 against Wolves, 5-0 against Portsmouth, 7-2 against Sunderland, 7-1 against Aston Villa, 7-0 against Stoke, and on the final day, an 8-0 demolition of Wigan. It was just paradise for Chelsea supporters. The team was in such a rampant flow state, scoring, defending, and performing immensely almost every weekend. Chelsea under Ancelotti played with an unmatched freedom at the time. There were some slip-ups though. Losses to Everton and Manchester City brought them back down to earth on the back end, and the true test came at the end of the campaign. Manchester United began breathing down their necks after a long season of being in pole position, only for United to take the lead with only 6 games left. And then came the title decider. Manchester United at Old Trafford on match day 33, 2-1 to the Blues. The victory was born out of contentious decision-making. Didier Drogba was very visibly offsides for Chelsea's second. The goal has even more significance when you consider that the league came down to a single point when things were wrapped up. Chelsea on 86, Manchester United on 85. A draw in that game would have made Manchester United champions. But I don't want to present any sort of narrative here. Plenty decisions went the way of United in those days, and none of this takes away from the incredible year that Chelsea had. Ancelotti never retreated into a defensive shell when many maybe thought that he should have to protect the lead that Chelsea had over the year. Instead, he attacked. And because of that, the team celebrated a historic double, an FA Cup and a Premier League. The most successful season in Chelsea's history at that point, depending on how you value different pieces of silverware, which this video, it's not for that. Chelsea's first and only, funnily enough, double of that kind. Despite this, to some, and I know you know who I'm talking about, this didn't feel like a momentous occasion at all. Chelsea were knocked out of the Champions League at the first knockout stage, ironically, by Jose Mourinho's Inter Milan. Even worse, the man who Roman Abramovich kicked out because he could not win the Champions League, then turned around, went to Italy, and won the Champions League. Feelings were hurt. It's a bit of a paradoxical thing to comprehend. Ancelotti was almost universally praised by all those in blue off the back end of this season. It was the kind of situation that you'd think would perhaps be the beginning of something everlasting. I mean, Ancelotti surely thought that. Instead, it was the peak before the fall. Championship seasons, for all the good that they bring, create expectations. And as I've said many times in the video already, nowhere else are those in charge of the eject button more trigger happy than Stamford Bridge. Chelsea began 2010-11 exactly where they left off, crushing teams with ruthless efficiency. 5 consecutive wins, 21-1 in terms of aggregate score. Yeah, you heard that correctly. They looked even better than the double winners. Back-to-back 6-0 wins to start the year is honestly just, it's ridiculous. But it appears that this quick start was somewhat of a deception. What followed was a textbook tale of divergence of interests and struggle in power. Chelsea had let go of a shocking number of experienced players: Michael Ballack, Joe Cole, Ricardo Carvalho, Deco. This was coming, as we've established, the team was on the older side to begin with. But, critically, Michael Ballack and a few others later revealed that Ancelotti didn't want them to leave. The club framed these departures as mutual decisions or cost-cutting measures, or steps towards a rebuild, but the manager was losing players that were important to his current success. The midfield reinforcement that was brought in was a 23-year-old Ramirez, good player but not ready, and a 30-year-old Yossi Benayoun. The net result was a squad with less experience to navigate the difficult moments. And then the injuries hit. John Obi Mikel went down in December, Frank Lampard went down 2 months before, Suddenly, Chelsea's midfield depth evaporated. But injuries, they don't explain what made this season so confusing. A large part of that can be attributed to a decision that remains contentious to this very day. November 11, 2010. Ray Wilkins, Ancelotti's assistant and a longtime Chelsea man, was sitting alongside the Chelsea manager, watching a reserve match at Cobham. Wilkins had been a Chelsea Youth Academy product dating back to the 70s. He was a fan favorite, someone who bled for the club, had been involved with Chelsea in one way or another his whole life, and now, as an assistant coach, had played a big role in the double. On that November day, Wilkins was called into an office and unceremoniously dismissed. Just like that, no warning pre-hand. When the media inquest came knocking, Wilkins himself stated that he had no idea what fueled this decision and why he was let go. Naturally, I did some searching myself to try to come to a conclusion and only saw rumor after rumor. One fan forum stated that in a strategy meeting, Wilkins had questioned Roman Abramovich and Chelsea CEO at the time Ron Gourlay's football acumen, saying, I guess in response to a suggestion that one or the other made, quote, "Well, if you'd ever played the game, you'd know otherwise," end quote. Brushing that unverified quote aside, I think it's obvious that a falling out of some sort with the higher-ups is likely the most plausible of all the reasons that you may hear. But it's not spicy enough. A rather wild rumor stated that Wilkins' wife outed the Chelsea CEO's extramarital affair in front of his spouse, and because of that, Wilkins was sacked. Correctly, this was brushed aside as some tabloid bait, but it just goes to show that the general public were left clueless here. Ancelotti had written in his autobiography that, without Wilkins, we couldn't have won a thing during that double season. And from what happened next, even if Wilkins wasn't the main reason, it's clear that Chelsea had lost something. Here's the timeline. Chelsea sack Wilkins 11 November. At the time, Chelsea are first in the league, 4 points ahead with a plus 23 goal difference, having played 12 games. That's not bad. Fast forward the clock to 2 months later in early January, and in the 11 games in between, Chelsea only won twice. Once in the league, once in the Champions League. Ancelotti's Chelsea, the reigning champions, were all of a sudden facing a 9-point deficit from the league leaders. Something had gone horribly wrong. As I've explained, this was about more than the Wilkins sacking. It was obvious from the outside looking in that the whole house was a mess. It led Ancelotti to become uncharacteristically candid in the wake of it, giving us some insight into what all of us already knew. He likened himself to Sir Alex Ferguson. Quote, "You have to compare me with Ferguson. It's a different position. It is because Ferguson has total control of the team. I am just technical direction. Full stop. Okay?" End quote. A double-winning manager admitting to the world that he wasn't fully trusted. Chelsea needed a win, a big one, and fast. In that desperation, Abramovich made a bold move, a record-breaking bold move. January 2011, Chelsea bought Fernando Torres, £50 million, a British transfer record and a prize that both Abramovich and Ancelotti were in alignment of. Torres was a world-class player, no doubt about it. For years, he was one of the finest strikers on the planet at Liverpool. Explosive, deadly, precise. But then he hurt his knee in a match versus Benfica after going up for a header and hearing a click when he came down. He didn't completely decline, but it was all downhill from there as he had part of his damaged meniscus surgically removed in order to be available for Spain for the World Cup in South Africa. An alternative treatment reportedly included a repair job instead of a removal that might have been better for long-term structural health, but any alternatives likely would have resulted in a longer recovery time, which meant no World Cup. And realistically speaking, it was a good call, if you ask me. We all know how that worked out for him, only for him to be taken off injured moments later. But that's a whole other story. Quite importantly though, that was a whole year before Chelsea paid the big bucks for him. The Torres that arrived was a shadow of his former self. Everybody could see it. His Chelsea record after 18 appearances only boasted 1 goal. All the same, at the time, you can't let your £50 million striker ride the bench. When Chelsea lost the Champions League quarter-final to Manchester United, even Sir Alex Ferguson admitted as much. Quote, "He had to play him," referring to Ancelotti's limited options. Torres was substituted at half-time for Drogba, who scored, actually, too little, too late. Chelsea were eliminated, and Ancelotti later admitted that he may have made a mistake. Despite everything, the Wilkins sacking, the injuries, the Torres drama, the mid-season collapse, Ancelotti nearly pulled off an extraordinary recovery. Chelsea surged in spring, winning enough games to close within 3 points of Manchester United by May. In yet another late-season showdown at Old Trafford, they had the chance to draw level on points at the top. They lost 2-1, and United claimed the title. In most contexts, it wasn't ideal, but it wasn't that bad. Chelsea finished second in the Premier League. This is respectable, even commendable, given the chaos. But Chelsea, they aren't most context. Second place under Abramovich is just first loser. An early FA Cup exit on penalties to Everton meant no domestic cups to soften the blow. Trophyless. Hopes unfulfilled. Abramovich's patience exhausted. Time was up. On the 22nd of May, the final day of the season, after a 1-0 loss to Everton at Goodison Park, Ancelotti gave a post-match press conference, only to then be pulled aside in a stadium corridor and sacked. That corridor sacking became iconic for all the wrong reasons. A perfect encapsulation of Chelsea's cutthroat culture. From Abramovich's perspective, the logic, it existed. The squad was far off from his desires and needed rebuilding. Perhaps Ancelotti, gifted with handling established stars, wasn't the right person to oversee a painful transition. So the decision, harsh as it was strategic. And football's sense of irony, it borders on cruel sometimes. Andre Villas-Boas, his replacement, a young manager tasked with said rebuild, didn't even last the entire 11-12 season. Instead, he was sacked halfway through, and his replacement, Roberto Di Matteo, only 2 months on the job, won the Champions League and the FA Cup. You couldn't script this stuff. Mind you, Carlo Ancelotti was managing the club almost exactly 1 year prior. Football is a dirty business. As Roberto Di Matteo, the man who succeeded where Ancelotti failed, and gave Abramovich his prized possession, was himself axed only 8 months in. Realistically, you can't deny that the end justified the means. The level of success that Chelsea achieved under Roman Abramovich borders on mythical, so you can't really fault him for doing what it takes to win. But back to the subject at hand. Ancelotti's tenure at Chelsea is one that evokes mixed emotions. Like I've already said, they played some of the best football that they have over the last 20 years or so. In a lot of ways, he was the ultimate Abramovich manager, but they clearly needed him to leave to achieve something great. So, in a lot of ways, he was also the ultimate victim of Abramovich's impossible standards. Ancelotti's Chelsea tenure remains compelling, precisely because it compressed so much drama into such a short span. For the small group of Chelsea fans that still romanticize this time, perhaps you shouldn't be thinking about what could have been, but rather focus and be thankful of what you ultimately got.